The train ticket fell from Paul's jacket pocket like a death sentence. I stood frozen in our bedroom, staring at the innocuous slip of paper that threatened to unravel my entire world. Chicago, next Friday, the day of Ellen's high school graduation. My hands trembled as I picked it up, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation. Paul he couldn't. Susan, you home? His voice echoed from downstairs, startling me out of my daze. I quickly shoved the ticket into my pocket. Up here, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Paul appeared in the doorway, his smile faltering as he took in my expression. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Just tired. How was work? He shrugged, loosening his tie. Same old, meetings, deadlines, you know how it is. I nodded, my throat tight. Ellen called earlier. She's staying at Jess's to work on their science project. Again? Paul frowned. She's been spending a lot of time there lately. She's 15, Paul. It's normal. He grunted, heading for the shower. As the water started running, I pulled out the ticket again, studying it. Round trip, first class. My stomach churned. I needed answers. Grabbing Paul's phone from the nightstand, I hesitated for a moment before entering his passcode. 1985. The year we met. At least that hadn't changed. My fingers shook as I scrolled through his messages. Work emails, group chats with friends, and then my heart stopped. A conversation with someone named M. No last name, just an initial. Can't wait to see you in Chicago, handsome. It's been too long. Missing you already. These secret meetings aren't enough anymore. I love you. When are you going to leave her? The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. Paul's voice called out from the bathroom. Everything all right out there? I swallowed hard. Just dropped something. Don't worry about it. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of loving Ellen as my own. All of it. A lie? The shower shut off, and I heard Paul moving around in the bathroom. I had to pull myself together. Taking a deep breath, I picked up his phone and placed it back on the nightstand. Paul emerged, a towel wrapped around his waist. Hey, I was thinking we could go out for dinner tonight. That new Italian place downtown? I nodded mechanically. Sounds nice. He frowned, stepping closer. Are you sure you're okay? You seem off. For a moment, I considered confronting him right then and there, demanding answers, screaming, throwing things. But Ellen's face flashed in my mind. Her graduation was in a week. I couldn't ruin that for her. I'm fine, I lied, plastering on a smile. Just worried about Ellen. She seems so distant lately. Paul's expression softened. She's a teenager, Sue. It's normal. Remember how you were telling me earlier? I bit back a bitter laugh. Of course I remembered. I remembered everything about our life together. Every moment, every promise. Did any of it matter to him? You're right, I said, standing up. I'll go start the car. Meet you downstairs in 10. He nodded, already turning away to get dressed. As I left the room, my mind was racing. I needed a plan. I needed proof. Most of all, I needed to protect Ellen. In the car, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd use. Hello, is this Hawkins Investigations? I need your help. As Paul climbed into the passenger seat, I ended the call. He smiled at me, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Ready to go, honey? I nodded, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Ready as I'll ever be. I never imagined I'd be a mother at 35, let alone to a child who wasn't biologically mine. But life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? The day I met Ellen, she was all gangly limbs and wary eyes, hiding behind Paul's legs. I knelt down, my heart pounding. Hi, Ellen. I'm Susan. It's nice to meet you. She peered at me, her small face scrunched in concentration. Do you like unicorns? I laughed, relief washing over me. I love unicorns. Do you want to show me yours? As Ellen dragged me to her room, chattering about her stuffed animal collection, I caught Paul's eye. He smiled, mouthing, thank you. But it wasn't always that easy. The first time Ellen called me Mom, I froze, panic rising in my chest. Later that night, I confessed my fears to Paul. What if I'm not good enough? I whispered, tears threatening to spill. What if I mess her up? Paul pulled me close, his voice steady. You're already an amazing mother, Sue. Ellen adores you. But what if? He cut me off with a kiss. No what ifs. We're in this together, remember? I nodded, clinging to his words like a lifeline. Together, always. Now, as I sat in the parking lot of Hawkins Investigations, that memory felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Together. What a joke. The door opened, and a gruff-looking man approached my car. Mrs. Thompson? I nodded, stepping out. Mr. Hawkins? He grunted in affirmation. Got your message. Infidelity case, right? I flinched at the bluntness. Yes, I need proof. Always do in these cases. Come on in, we'll talk details. Inside his cluttered office, I perched on the edge of a worn leather chair, feeling like I was in a bad noir film. Hawkins settled behind his desk, pulling out a notepad. Tell me everything you know. I took a deep breath, recounting the train ticket, the text messages, Paul's recent late nights at the office. With each word, the reality of my situation sank in deeper. Hawkins nodded, scribbling notes. Classic signs. Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson, we'll get you the evidence you need. As I left his office, my phone buzzed. A text from Ellen. Mom, can we talk when you get home? It's important. My heart raced. Did she know? Had she noticed something off with Paul, too? I rushed home, finding Ellen pacing in the living room. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red-rimmed. Honey, what's wrong? She hesitated, then blurted out, I think Dad's cheating on you. The world tilted on its axis. I stumbled to the couch, sinking down. What makes you say that? Ellen sat beside me, her voice trembling. I overheard him on the phone last night. He was talking about meeting someone in Chicago, and he said he loved her. I pulled her close, my mind reeling. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you had to hear that. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. You knew? I nodded, my throat tight. I just found out yesterday. I was trying to figure out how to tell you. Ellen's face crumpled, and she buried her head in my shoulder, sobbing. I held her, my own tears falling silently. After a while, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. What are we going to do? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. What were we going to do? How could we salvage our family from this betrayal? Before I could answer, the front door opened. Paul's voice called out, I'm home. Where is everyone? Ellen and I locked eyes, panic mirrored in our expressions. In that moment, I made a decision. No more secrets, no more lies. We're in here, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to talk. As Paul's footsteps approached, I squeezed Ellen's hand. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. Mother and daughter, united against the storm. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife as Paul entered. His easy smile faltered when he saw our faces. What's going on? He asked, his eyes darting between Ellen and me. I took a deep breath. Paul, we need to talk about Chicago. The color drained from his face. What about Chicago? Ellen stood up, her voice trembling but determined. We know, Dad. We know about her. Paul's facade crumbled. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. I can explain. Save it. I snapped, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. How long, Paul? How long have you been lying to us? He looked up, his eyes pleading. It's not what you think. Marion is just... Marion, Ellen interrupted, her voice cracking. You're on a first-name basis with your mistress? Paul flinched as if he'd been slapped. Ellen, honey, please. Don't honey me, she spat. I trusted you. We both did. I placed a hand on Ellen's shoulder, steadying her. We want the truth, Paul. All of it. What followed was a painful confession. Marion was a colleague, a friendship that had turned into something more. It had been going on for months. Each word was like a dagger to my heart. I never meant for this to happen, Paul finished lamely. I laughed bitterly. But it did happen, Paul, and on Ellen's graduation day of all times. Ellen's head snapped up. What? I hesitated, realizing my mistake too late. The Chicago trip? It's scheduled for your graduation day. The look of betrayal on Ellen's face was devastating. She turned to Paul, her voice barely above a whisper. You were going to miss my graduation for her? Paul reached out, but Ellen recoiled. I'm sorry, Save it, she said, echoing my earlier words. I'm going to Jess's. Before either of us could stop her, Ellen stormed out, the front door slamming behind her. I rounded on Paul. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? He slumped further into his chair. Of course not. I love you both. I got lost. Lost? I scoffed. You're a grown man, Paul, not a toddler in a supermarket. You made choices that hurt your family. Paul nodded, defeated. What happens now? I stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my years. Now I'm going to find our daughter, and when I get back, I expect you to be gone. Gone? Paul's head shot up. You're kicking me out? Consider it a trial separation, I said, my voice cold. I need time to think, and Ellen needs space. You owe us that much. As I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, Paul called out, Susan, wait. I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix this. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning, I said, "Sometimes, Paul, sorry isn't enough." The drive to Jess's house was a blur. My mind raced with everything that had happened. How had we gotten here? When did our happy family start to crumble? I pulled up to the curb, spotting Ellen sitting on the front steps. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and puffy. "Hey," I said softly, sitting beside her. "Hey," she mumbled back. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the day pressing down on us. Finally, Ellen spoke. "What are we going to do, Mom?" I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll figure it out together." She leaned into me, her voice small. "I hate him." "No, you don't," I said gently. "You're hurt and angry, and that's okay. But hate will only hurt you in the long run." Ellen nodded, sniffling. "I just want things to go back to normal." I kissed the top of her head, my heart breaking for her. "I know, baby. Me too." As we sat there, the sun setting behind us, I realized that normal was a thing of the past. Our lives had been irrevocably changed, but looking at Ellen, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, we'd face it as a team. "Come on," I said, standing up. "Let's go home." Ellen hesitated. Is he still there?" I shook my head. "No, it's just us now." She took my hand, squeezing it tight. "Okay, let's go home." As we walked to the car, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, fear, but underneath it all, a small spark of hope. We'd weathered this storm. Whatever came next, we'd weather that too, together. The days following Paul's departure blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and tense conversations. Ellen retreated further into herself, barely leaving her room except for school. I threw myself into work, desperate for any distraction from the gaping hole in our lives. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I finally dragged myself home early, determined to connect with Ellen. The house was quiet as I entered, but I heard muffled voices coming from upstairs. My heart leapt. Was Ellen finally talking to a friend? As I climbed the stairs, the voices grew clearer. One was definitely Ellen's, but the other... My blood ran cold. "Paul." I burst into Ellen's room without knocking. They both jumped, guilty expressions on their faces. Paul was perched on the edge of Ellen's bed, while she sat cross-legged, clutching a pillow to her chest. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Paul stood up, hands raised placatingly. "Susan, please. I was just talking to Ellen about..." "About what?" I interrupted. "About how you betrayed our family? About how you were planning to abandon your daughter on her graduation day?" Ellen flinched at my words, and I immediately regretted my harshness. But the sight of Paul in our home, acting like nothing had changed, ignited a fury I couldn't contain. "Mom," Ellen said softly, "Dad was just..." "No," I cut her off. "Whatever he was just doing, it stops now. Paul, get out." He hesitated, looking between Ellen and me. "Susan, we need to talk about this, as a family." I laughed bitterly. "Family? You gave up that right when you decided to start a new one with Marion." Paul's face paled. "How did you?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I snapped. "What matters is that you're here, in our home, trying to manipulate our daughter." "I'm not manipulating anyone," Paul protested. "Ellen called me. She wanted to talk." I turned to Ellen, hurt and betrayal washing over me. "Is that true?" She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to understand why." My anger deflated, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Paul took a step towards me. "Susan, please, let's sit down and talk about this rationally." Something in me snapped. "Rationally? You want to talk rationally about how you destroyed our family? About how you lied and cheated and..." I stopped abruptly as a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room spun, and I grabbed the doorframe for support. "Mom?" Ellen's voice sounded far away. "Are you okay?" I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The last thing I saw was Paul and Ellen's panicked faces as the world went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Ellen was curled up in a chair beside me, her face tear-stained even in sleep. Paul was nowhere to be seen. A nurse entered, smiling when she saw I was awake. "Welcome back, Mrs. Thompson. How are you feeling?" "What happened?" I croaked, my throat dry. "You fainted," she explained gently. "Your blood pressure was dangerously high. The doctor wants to run some tests, but it seems the stress of your situation may have contributed." I closed my eyes, shame washing over me. I'd let Paul's betrayal consume me so completely that I'd neglected my own health, and worse, I'd scared Ellen. As if on cue, Ellen stirred, her eyes widening when she saw me awake. Mom, you're okay. She threw herself into my arms, and I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm okay now. Ellen pulled back, wiping her eyes. Dad's in the waiting room. He's been here all night. I tensed, torn between gratitude for his concern and anger at his presence. But looking at Ellen's hopeful face, I realized I had a choice to make. I could let my bitterness towards Paul poison our family further, or I could find a way to move forward, for Ellen's sake and for my own. Taking a deep breath, I squeezed Ellen's hand. Can you ask him to come in? I think it's time we all talked. As Ellen nodded and hurried out, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. Things couldn't go on as they had been. It was time for a change, and I was ready to face it head on. The hospital room felt suffocating as Paul entered, his face a mask of concern and guilt. Ellen squeezed my hand before slipping out, leaving us alone. Susan, Paul began, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I held up a hand, silencing him. Save it, Paul. I didn't ask you here for apologies. He nodded, sinking into the chair Ellen had vacated. Then why? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I need to know everything. No more lies, no more half-truths. I deserve that much. Paul's shoulders slumped. You're right. You do. What followed was a painful confession that shook me to my core. Marion wasn't just a fling. They'd been seeing each other for over a year. They'd met at a conference in Chicago and had been carrying on their affair ever since. We never meant to fall in love, Paul said, his eyes pleading for understanding. The word love hit me like a physical blow. Love? I spat. You destroy our family and call it love? Paul flinched. I know it's not fair. I know I've hurt you both terribly, but I can't change how I feel. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. And Ellen's graduation? You were really going to miss that for her? He had the decency to look ashamed. I wasn't thinking straight. Marion had surprised me with tickets to a show in Chicago. I didn't realize the dates conflicted until later. And you chose her, I said flatly. Paul nodded, unable to meet my gaze. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy between us. Finally, I spoke. I want a divorce. He nodded again, unsurprised. I understand. I'll give you whatever you want. The house, full custody of Ellen. Ellen isn't a bargaining chip, I snapped. She's our daughter. Or have you forgotten that in your new life with Marion? Paul's face crumpled. Of course not. I love Ellen more than anything. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, Paul, I said, my voice softening despite myself. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Ellen peeked in, her face anxious. Is everything okay? I forced a smile. Come in, sweetheart. We were just talking. Ellen entered hesitantly, looking between us. About what? Paul and I exchanged a glance. It was time for the hardest conversation of all. Honey, I began gently, your father and I have decided to get a divorce. Ellen's face fell, but she didn't look surprised. Because of Marion? Paul started. You know about Marion? She nodded, her voice small. I overheard you on the phone once. I didn't want to believe it, but my heart broke for her. Oh, Ellen, I'm so sorry you've been carrying this alone. She shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite the tears in her eyes. It's okay. I kind of figured this was coming. Paul reached out to her, but she stepped back. Ellen, please. I know I've messed up, but I still love you. That will never change. Ellen's face hardened. If you loved us, you wouldn't have done this. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. I realized then that it wasn't just my marriage that was broken. Paul's relationship with Ellen might be irreparably damaged too. As I watched them, father and daughter, unable to bridge the chasm between them, I knew I had to make a decision, not just for myself, but for Ellen. We couldn't go on like this, trapped in a limbo of hurt and resentment. Paul, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I think it's best if you move out, permanently. He nodded, resigned. I understand. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow. Ellen's shoulders relaxed slightly, and I knew I'd made the right choice. As Paul left the room, promising to visit again soon, I pulled Ellen close. We're going to be okay, I whispered, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. It's just you and me now, kid. We'll figure this out together. As Ellen clung to me, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect her and rebuild our lives. The road ahead would be difficult, but we'd face it as a team. Mother and daughter, against the world. The days after my hospital stay passed in a blur of legal meetings and hushed conversations. Paul moved out quietly, leaving behind a house full of memories and a daughter who refused to speak to him. I threw myself into work and caring for Ellen, desperate to maintain some semblance of normalcy. It was a rainy Tuesday when everything came to a head. I was in my home office, poring over divorce papers, when I heard the front door slam. Ellen's footsteps thundered up the stairs, followed by the sound of her bedroom door slamming shut. Alarmed, I rushed to check on her. "Ellen, honey, what's wrong?" No response. I knocked gently. "Ellen, please, talk to me." The door flew open, revealing Ellen's tear-stained face. I saw them, as she choked out. My heart sank. Saw who? Dad and her, Marion. Ellen spat the name like a curse. They were at the mall, holding hands, laughing like nothing was wrong. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." Ellen's face crumpled. "How could he do this to us, Mom? How could he just replace us?" I pulled her into a tight hug, my own tears threatening to fall. "I don't know, baby. I wish I had answers for you." We stood there for a long moment, by clinging to each other. Finally, Ellen pulled away, wiping her eyes. "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in her voice made me pause. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I've known about Dad's affair for a while, longer than I let on." I felt the floor shift beneath me. "What? How long?" "A few months," Ellen admitted eyes. "I found some texts on his phone. I didn't know how to tell you. My mind reeled. All those times Ellen had been distant, locked away in her room. She'd been carrying this burden alone. "Oh, Ellen," I breathed. "Why didn't you say something?" She shrugged, looking small and vulnerable. "I thought, if I ignored it, maybe it would go away. Maybe Dad would realize what he was risking and stop." My heart broke for her. "Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. None of this is your responsibility." Ellen's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "But it is. I'm the reason you stayed with him for so long. If I hadn't been here, you could have left years ago." I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "Listen to me, Ellen. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You're not the reason I stayed. You're the reason I found the strength to leave." She blinked, surprised. "Really?" I nodded, cupping her face in my hands. "Really, you and me, we're a team. No matter what happens with your dad, that will never change." Ellen's lip trembled. "Promise?" "I promise," I said firmly. "Now, how about we order some pizza and have a movie night? Just the two of us?" For the first time in weeks, Ellen smiled. "Can we get extra cheese?" I laughed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Extra cheese it is!" As we settled onto the couch, surrounded by comfort food and cheesy rom-coms, I felt a surge of determination. We'd been through hell, but we'd come out stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. Just as the movie was reaching its climax, my phone buzzed. A text from Paul. "We need to talk. It's important." I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. What now? Haven't we been through enough? Ellen noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, then showed her the text. Her face hardened. "Are you going to meet him?" I took a deep breath, weighing my options. On one hand, I was done with Paul's drama. On the other, if it was truly important. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Ellen, realizing in that moment that her opinion mattered more than anyone else's. She thought for a moment, then squared her shoulders. "I think we should hear him out, together." I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension. "Okay, together it is." As I typed out a response to Paul, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something big. Whatever news he had, whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain. Ellen and I would face it as a united front. The real test of our strength was about to begin. The coffee shop buzzed with quiet conversation, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for Paul to arrive. Ellen sat beside me, her hand clasped tightly in mine. "We can still leave," I whispered, giving her one last chance to back out. She shook her head, jaw set. "No, we need to hear what he has to say." The bell above the door chimed, and Paul walked in. My breath caught in my throat. He looked different. Tired, yes, but there was something else. A nervousness I'd never seen in him before. He spotted us and made his way over, hesitating before sitting down. "Thank you for meeting me, both of you." Ellen remained silent, her grip on my hand tightening. "What's this about, Paul?" I asked, cutting to the chase. He took a deep breath. "Marian's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Ellen gasped beside me, her free hand flying to her mouth. How far along?" I managed to choke out. 3 months, Paul said, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I only found out last week. I wanted to tell you both in person." Ellen's voice was barely above a whisper. "You're going to have another baby?" Paul nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know this changes everything. I'm so sorry." I felt numb, my mind racing. A baby. Paul and Marian were having a baby. Ellen would have a half-sibling. The family I thought we had was shattering even further. "What does this mean for us?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "For the divorce?" Paul ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Marian wants me to move in with her, to be there for the baby." Ellen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't do this," she choked out before running towards the restroom. I started to follow, but Paul caught my arm. "Susan, wait, there's more." I turned back, anger flaring. What more could there possibly be? He swallowed hard. "Marian's job is transferring her to New York. She wants me to go with her." The world tilted on its axis. "New York? You're moving across the country?" Paul nodded, looking miserable. "I haven't decided yet. I don't want to leave Ellen, but you have a new family now," I finished bitterly. He flinched. "It's not like that. I love Ellen. I love you both. I don't know what to do." I laughed humorlessly. "That seems to be a recurring theme with you, Paul." Before he could respond, Ellen returned, her eyes red-rimmed but her face set in determination. "I heard everything," she said, her voice surprisingly calm, "and I've made a decision." We both turned to her, surprised. "I want to live with Mom full-time," Ellen continued. "No shared custody, no visitation. I don't want to see you anymore, Dad." Paul's face crumpled. "Ellen, please, I know I've messed up, but—" "No," Ellen cut him off. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." I felt a surge of pride mixed with heartbreak. My little girl so strong in the face of such pain. Paul looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Susan, please, talk to her." I shook my head. "This is Ellen's decision. I support her completely." He slumped in his chair, defeated. "What happens now?" I stood up, pulling Ellen close. "Now, we finish the divorce. You go to New York with Marian and your new baby. And Ellen and we move on." As we walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Paul behind, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, but also relief. The uncertainty was over. We had a clear path forward. Ellen squeezed my hand. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" I looked down at her, this brave, resilient girl who had become the center of my world. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be more than okay." As we stepped out into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we'd face it together. Mother and daughter against the world. The real journey was just beginning. The morning of Ellen's graduation dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past few months. As I helped Ellen into her gown, I couldn't help but marvel at the young woman she'd become. "You ready for this?" I asked, smoothing down her collar. She nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her eyes. "As ready as I'll ever be." We'd moved into our new apartment just a week ago, boxes still scattered around. It was smaller than our old house, but it felt like home. Our home. As we drove to the school, Ellen fidgeted with her cap. Do you think Dad will show up?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I don't know, honey, but whatever happens, I'm here." The auditorium was packed when we arrived. I spotted Paul almost immediately, standing awkwardly near the back. Our eyes met, and he gave a hesitant wave. Ellen tensed beside me. "You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to," I whispered. She squared her shoulders. "No, I think I need to." I watched as Ellen approached Paul. They spoke briefly, Paul's face a mix of regret and pride. When Ellen returned, her eyes were dry but determined. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I told him I'm glad he came, but that doesn't change anything." Pride swelled in my chest, my brave, resilient girl. As the ceremony began, I found myself reflecting on our journey. The pain, the betrayal, the uncertainty. It had all led us here, to this moment of triumph and new beginnings. When Ellen's name was called, I cheered louder than anyone. Our eyes met as she crossed the stage, and in that moment I knew we'd be okay. After the ceremony, we were swept up in a whirlwind of photos and congratulations. Paul approached cautiously, Marian hovering in the background. Congratulations, Ellen, he said softly. I'm so proud of you. Ellen's smile was polite but distant. Thanks, Dad. An awkward silence fell. Finally, Paul cleared his throat. We're, heading to New York next week. I was hoping maybe we could have dinner before we go? Ellen glanced at me, then back at her father. I don't think that's a good idea. Maybe someday, but not now. Paul nodded, disappointment and understanding warring on his face. I understand. Take care of each other, okay? As he walked away, I pulled Ellen close. You okay? She took a deep breath. Yeah, I think I am. That night, as we celebrated with takeout and ice cream in our new apartment, Ellen turned to me with a serious expression. Mom, I want you to know something, she said. I don't regret choosing you. Not for a second. Tears pricked my eyes. Oh, sweetheart, I don't regret choosing you either. She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. Good, because you're stuck with me now. We laughed, the sound filling our small living room. It wasn't perfect. There were still boxes to unpack, wounds to heal, a future to figure out. But we were together, and that was what mattered. As I tucked Ellen into bed that night, a ritual she claimed she was too old for but secretly loved, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Mom? Ellen's voice was sleepy. Do you think we'll be okay? I smoothed her hair back, remembering all we'd been through. The betrayal, the heartache, the difficult choices, but also the love, the resilience, the unbreakable bond between us. Yeah, baby, I said softly. We're going to be more than okay. As I closed her door, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who had discovered Paul's betrayal all those months ago. Stronger, wiser, ready to face whatever came next. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a sense of hope I hadn't experienced in years. Our story wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain. Ellen and I would face them together. Mother and daughter against the world. And that was all we needed. The yoga mat slipped from my fingers, hitting the polished studio floor with a soft thud. My heart raced as I stared at the familiar face peering through the glass door. It couldn't be. Not here. Not now. Lisa, is everything all right? Sarah, one of my regular students, touched my arm gently. I blinked, forcing a smile. Yes, of course. Just a little clumsy today. I bent to retrieve the mat, buying time to compose myself. When I straightened, the door swung open, and in walked the ghost from my past. Claire. Well, well, if it isn't Lisa Thompson! Her voice rang out, saccharine sweet and dripping with false warmth. It's been ages, darling. I swallowed hard, acutely aware of the curious glances from my students. Claire, what a surprise! She sauntered over, her designer yoga outfit clinging to her still perfect figure. I just moved to the area, and when I saw your name on the studio's website, I simply had to drop in. We have so much catching up to do. Class is about to start, I said, gesturing to the gathering students. Perhaps another time. Claire's eyes glittered. Oh, don't be silly, I'm here for the class. You don't mind a new student, do you? What could I say? I forced a smile. Of course not. Everyone's welcome. As Claire found a spot, I took my place at the front of the room, willing my hands to stop shaking. Let's begin with some deep breaths, I instructed, closing my eyes. But even as I guided the class through the familiar poses, my mind raced. Why was she here? After all these years, after everything she'd done. Wonderful class, Lisa, Claire gushed afterward as the other students filed out. You haven't lost your touch. I busied myself rolling up mats. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Oh, I did, and I couldn't help but notice that gorgeous ring. You're married now? I instinctively twisted the band on my finger. Yes, for 15 years. How marvelous. I'd love to meet the lucky man. Why don't you and what's his name? Adam, I said, the word sticking in my throat. Adam, of course. Why don't you and Adam join me for dinner this weekend? We can catch up properly. I hesitated, searching for an excuse, but Claire's smile never wavered, her eyes locked on mine. I knew that look. She wouldn't take no for an answer. I'll have to check with Adam, I said finally. He works late most nights. Oh, I'm sure you can convince him, Claire purred, for old time's sake. As she sashayed out the door, I sank onto a nearby bench, my legs suddenly weak. Old times. The very thought made my stomach churn. That evening, I stood at the kitchen counter, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. The knife came down with a satisfying thwack against the cutting board. Whoa there, chef. Adam's voice startled me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, peering over my shoulder. What did those carrots ever do to you? I leaned back into his embrace, savoring the familiar warmth. Sorry, just a little distracted. Tough day at the studio? I hesitated. Actually, an old friend showed up. Adam released me, reaching for a piece of carrot. Oh, anyone I know? No, I said quickly. Too quickly. Just someone from college. Claire. Claire, he repeated, frowning slightly. You've never mentioned her before. I turned back to the cutting board. We weren't that close. But close enough for her to drop by your studio? I could feel his eyes on me, curious and a little concerned. I forced a laugh. You know how it is. Some people just can't let go of the past. Adam chuckled, the tension broken. Well, as long as she's not trying to rope you into some pyramid scheme or something. If only it were that simple. I thought of Claire's invitation, of the predatory gleam in her eye. Actually, I said slowly, she did invite us to dinner this weekend. Adam raised an eyebrow. Both of us? That's a bit forward for an old acquaintance. I shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. That's Claire for you. Always been a social butterfly. Well, Adam said, stealing another carrot, I suppose we could go. Might be fun to hear some stories from your wild college days. My knife slipped, nicking my finger. A bright bead of blood welled up, and with it, a surge of panic. What had I done? The restaurant buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Claire sat across from us, her red lips curved in a perpetual smile as she regaled Adam with stories from our college days. Oh, Lisa was always so serious, she laughed, touching Adam's arm. I had to practically drag her out to parties. I gripped my wine glass tighter. I remember it differently, I said, forcing a smile. You were the one always begging me for help with assignments. Claire's eyes flashed, but her smile never wavered. Ancient history, darling. Adam, did Lisa ever tell you about the time we... As she launched into another exaggerated tale, I caught Adam's eye. He was hanging on her every word, laughing at all the right moments. I hadn't seen him this animated in years. Excuse me, I murmured, standing abruptly. I need some air. Outside, I leaned against the cool brick wall, taking deep breaths. This was a mistake. I should never have agreed to this dinner. Lisa? Adam's voice startled me. Are you okay? I plastered on a smile. Fine, just a little warm in there. He frowned, studying my face. You've been acting strange all night. What's going on? Before I could answer, the restaurant door swung open. Claire sauntered out, her perfume wafting over us. Everything all right out here? Adam turned to her, his frown dissolving. Just checking on Lisa. She's not feeling well. Oh, poor thing, Claire cooed, her eyes gleaming. Why don't you head home, sweetie? Adam and I can settle the bill. I opened my mouth to protest, but Adam was already nodding. Good idea. I'll be home soon, Lisa. As I watched them disappear back into the restaurant, a chill ran down my spine. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed. Adam's side was cold, untouched. I found him on the couch, still in last night's clothes. Adam? I shook him gently. What happened? He groaned, rubbing his eyes. Claire and I got to talking after you left. Lost track of time. Talking? I echoed, my stomach churning. Until dawn? He sat up, defensive. It's not a big deal, Lisa. We were catching up. Catching up? You barely know her. Well, maybe I'd like to, he snapped. She's actually interesting to talk to. The words hit me like a slap. I stepped back, hurt and anger warring inside me. And I'm not? Adam sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. That's not what I meant. It's just... When was the last time we did anything spontaneous? Anything fun? I didn't realize our life was so boring, I said coldly. He stood, frustration etched on his face. That's not... Look, I'm going to shower. We can talk about this later. As the bathroom door slammed, I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. This was happening too fast. Claire had been back in our lives for barely a week, and already she was driving a wedge between us. My phone buzzed with a text. Claire, had such a lovely time last night. Adam's a real gem. Lucky you. Yoga later? I stared at the message, my hands shaking. This was her game, always had been, insinuating herself into others' lives, taking what she wanted. But not this time. I wouldn't let her win again. I typed back, can't make it. Busy. Her reply was instant. Shame. Adam mentioned he might stop by the studio. Guess I'll have to entertain him myself. The phone slipped from my fingers. Adam, going to her yoga class? He'd never shown interest in yoga before, As if on cue, Adam emerged from the bathroom, freshly showered and dressed for work. "I might be late tonight," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." The front door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone with the echoes of Claire's laughter ringing in my ears. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The weeks crawled by, each day a new exercise in restraint, as I watched Claire sink her claws deeper into my life. I'd taken to rearranging Adam's schedule, suggesting impromptu date nights, anything to keep him away from her clutches. But it was like trying to hold water in my hands. The harder I gripped, the more slipped through my fingers. "Lisa, have you seen my blue tie?" Adam called from the bedroom. I froze, the breakfast dishes forgotten in my hands. The blue tie. Claire had complimented it at dinner last week. "I think it's at the cleaners," I lied, the silk fabric burning a hole in my pocket where I'd hidden it. Adam appeared in the doorway, frowning. "That's odd. I could have sworn I just wore it." I shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Maybe you're thinking of a different one?" He studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Never mind. I'll wear the red one." As he left for work, I sagged against the counter, guilt and fear warring in my chest. What was I becoming? Later that day, I arrived at the studio early, hoping to center myself before class. But as I approached the door, I heard familiar voices inside. "Oh, Adam, you're a natural." Claire's laughter drifted through the crack. "Who knew you had such flexibility?" My hand froze on the doorknob. "Adam, here?" I pushed the door open to find them tangled together on a yoga mat, Claire's hands on Adam's hips as she adjusted his pose. They sprang apart at my entrance, Adam's face flushing red. "Lisa," he stammered. I thought I'd try out a class. Claire was just showing me some basics." I bet she was. I plastered on a smile, my voice sickly sweet. How thoughtful of her. But class doesn't start for another hour. Claire stood, smoothing her yoga pants. "Oh, we were just having a private session. Adam mentioned he was curious, and well, you know me, always happy to help a friend." Friend. The word dripped with insinuation. I turned to Adam, my smile brittle. "Honey, why didn't you tell me you wanted to try yoga? I would have been happy to teach you." He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to surprise you. Thought it might be fun to share your passion." "How sweet," Claire cooed. "Isn't he just the most thoughtful husband, Lisa?" I gritted my teeth. "The very best. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to set up for class." As Claire sauntered out, I busied myself with mats and blocks, unable to look at Adam. He hovered nearby, clearing his throat. "Lisa, You should get going." I cut him off. "Wouldn't want to be late for work." He hesitated, then nodded. "Right. I'll see you tonight?" I didn't answer, focusing on aligning the mats with military precision. The door closed softly behind him, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. That evening, I sat at my vanity, mechanically brushing my hair. In the mirror, I watched Adam putter around the room, guilt etched on his face. "Lisa," he began, "about today." "It's fine," I interrupted, the brush moving faster. "You wanted to try yoga. There's nothing wrong with that." He sat on the bed, sighing. "I know you're upset, but Claire's just being friendly. You're reading too much into this." The brush clattered to the floor. I whirled to face him, years of pent-up frustration boiling over. "Friendly? Adam, she's practically throwing herself at you. How can you be so blind?" "You're being paranoid," he snapped. "Claire's not like that. Maybe if you gave her a chance." "A chance," I laughed bitterly. "I've known her a lot longer than you have. Trust me, this is exactly like her." Adam stood, his face hardening. "I think I can judge someone's character for myself, Lisa. I'm not some naive schoolboy you need to protect." As he stormed out of the room, I turned back to the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. This couldn't go on. Something had to give. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Great seeing Adam today. He's such a quick learner. Drinks tomorrow?" I stared at the message, a plan forming in my mind. Two could play at this game. It was time to beat Claire at her own twisted game. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, my world crumbling around me. The sight before me was unmistakable. Claire draped across our bed, her blonde hair fanned out on my pillow. And Adam hastily buttoning his shirt, his face a mask of guilt and defiance. "Lisa," he started, but I held up a hand, silencing him. Claire sat up, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Oh, darling, did we forget to lock the door?" The casual cruelty in her voice snapped something inside me. I lunged forward, my hand connecting with her cheek in a resounding slap. She reeled back, shock replacing her smug expression. Lisa. Adam grabbed my arm, pulling me away. What the hell are you doing? I wrenched free from his grasp, my voice low and dangerous. What am I doing? What are you doing, Adam? In our bed? With her. Claire rubbed her cheek, her eyes glittering with malice. Now, Lisa. No need for dramatics. Adam and I were just reconnecting. Reconnecting? I spat the word out. You barely knew each other a month ago. Adam stepped between us, his face flushed. Lisa, calm down. This isn't what it looks like. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Really? Because it looks like you're sleeping with my so-called friend in our marital bed. It just happened, he pleaded. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Claire slithered off the bed, wrapping herself around Adam's arm. Oh, I think we meant it, darling. No use lying now. I stared at them, these two people I thought I knew. How had it come to this? How long? I whispered. Adam looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Claire, however, had no such qualms. Does it matter? The point is, Lisa dear, that Adam's made his choice. And it's not you. The room spun around me. I gripped the doorframe for support, my knees threatening to buckle. Adam? I pleaded, hating the weakness in my voice. Is this true? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. Lisa, you have to understand. Things between us, they've been strained for a while. Claire, she makes me feel alive again. Each word was a dagger to my heart. And I whispered. That's not what I meant. He backpedaled. It's just, you've become so controlling lately, always checking up on me, rearranging my schedule. I felt suffocated. I was trying to protect you, I cried, to keep her away from you. Claire laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, honey, you can't keep a man who doesn't want to be kept. I turned to Adam, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd loved for 15 years. Is that true? You don't want to be with me anymore? He hesitated, and in that moment I knew it was over. I think, he said slowly, that we need some time apart to figure things out. Claire clapped her hands together. Wonderful idea. I have a spare room you can use, Adam. We'll have you moved in by tonight. The casual way they discussed dismantling my life sent a surge of rage through me. Get out, I hissed. Both of you, now. Adam reached for me. Lisa, please. Get out, I screamed, grabbing the nearest object, a framed photo of our wedding day, and hurling it at the wall. It shattered, glass raining down on the floor. They scrambled past me, Claire tugging Adam along. As the front door slammed shut, I sank to the ground, surrounded by the broken pieces of my marriage. Hours passed. Night fell. I sat in the darkness, my mind replaying every moment, every sign I should have seen. The late nights at work. The sudden interest in yoga. The way he'd light up when Claire entered a room. As dawn broke, casting pale light across the wreckage of my bedroom, I made a decision. This wasn't over. Claire had taken everything from me, but I wouldn't go down without a fight. It was time to show them both what I was truly capable of. I reached for my phone, my fingers steady as I dialed a number I never thought I'd use. Hello, I said, my voice cold and determined. I'd like to speak to a divorce lawyer. The divorce papers lay on the kitchen table, a stark reminder of how quickly life can unravel. I stared at them, my coffee growing cold in my hands. It had been 3 weeks since I'd caught Adam and Claire together, and the pain hadn't dulled. If anything, it had crystallized into something harder, sharper. The doorbell rang, startling me from my reverie. I wasn't expecting anyone. As I opened the door, my heart sank. Claire stood there, looking infuriatingly perfect in a sundress that probably cost more than my monthly yoga studio rent. Lisa, darling, she cooed, pushing past me into the house. We need to talk. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shove her back out. There's nothing to talk about, Claire. You won. Congratulations. She laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Oh, honey, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about moving forward. I followed her into the kitchen, watching as she eyed the divorce papers. Moving forward? I echoed. Is that what you call destroying someone's marriage? Claire turned to me, her expression a mask of false sympathy. Lisa, let's be honest, your marriage was over long before I came along. I just expedited things. You manipulative bye. She held up a hand, cutting me off. Now, no need for name-calling. I'm here to help, believe it or not. I laugh. Help? How could you possibly help me? Claire's eyes glittered. By offering you a way out, a clean break, so to speak. She reached into her purse, pulling out a thick envelope. Adam feels terrible about how things ended. He wants to make it right. I stared at the envelope, suspicion gnawing at me. What is that? A settlement offer, Claire said smoothly. Quite generous, really. Enough for you to start over somewhere new, away from all this unpleasantness. My hand trembled as I took the envelope. Inside was a check with more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life. For a moment I was tempted to take the money and run, leave this whole mess behind. But then I looked at Claire's smug face, and something inside me snapped. You think you can buy me off? I hissed, ripping the check in half. That I'll just disappear and let you two live happily ever after? Claire's smile faltered. Don't be foolish, Lisa. This is the best offer you're going to get. I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. You have no idea what I'm capable of, Claire. You think you've won? This is just the beginning. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. What are you talking about? I smiled, cold and hard. You'll see. Now get out of my house. As the door slammed behind her, I sank to the floor, my mind racing. I'd acted tough, but the truth was I had no idea what to do next. How could I possibly fight back against Claire and Adam? My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Heard about what happened. I'm so sorry, Lisa. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. David. David, Claire's ex-husband. We'd met briefly at a party years ago before Claire had sunk her claws into him, too. I hesitated, then typed back, Thanks, David. Could use a friendly ear right now. His response was immediate. Coffee tomorrow? I know a quiet place where we won't run into anyone. I stared at the message, an idea forming. Claire had taken everything from me, used her knowledge of my life to manipulate Adam. But two could play at that game, and who would know Claire's weaknesses better than the man she'd discarded? My fingers flew across the keyboard. Perfect. See you then. As I hit send, a sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Claire thought she'd broken me, but she'd only succeeded in setting me free. Free from the constraints of being the perfect wife, the understanding friend. I stood, walking to the mirror in the hallway. The woman staring back at me was different. Harder, determined. Game on, Claire, I whispered to my reflection. Let's see how you like it when the tables are turned. I picked up the phone again, dialing my lawyer. It was time to stop playing defense. Tomorrow, with David's help, I'd start planning my counterattack, and this time, I wouldn't hold back. The courtroom felt suffocating as I sat across from Adam, his eyes darting between me and Claire, who sat smugly in the gallery. My lawyer's voice droned on about asset division and alimony, but all I could focus on was the way Adam's hand twitched, as if longing to reach for Claire. Your Honor, my lawyer said, given Mr. Thompson's infidelity and Mrs. Thompson's contributions to their shared life, we're seeking a more equitable distribution of assets. Adam's lawyer jumped in, his voice grating. My client contests the characterization of events, Mrs. Thompson's controlling behavior. Objection, my lawyer interjected. Irrelevant and prejudicial. As they bickered, I caught David's eye in the back of the courtroom. He gave me a subtle nod, a reminder of our plan. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. Your Honor, I said, standing abruptly, if I may address the court? The judge peered at me over his glasses. This is unusual, Mrs. Thompson, but proceed. I walked to the center of the courtroom, feeling all eyes on me. I'd like to withdraw my petition for alimony and asset division. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Adam's jaw dropped while Claire's eyes narrowed suspiciously. I don't want anything from a man who couldn't honor his vows, I continued, my voice steady. Let him keep it all. I'll rebuild on my own terms. The judge looked bewildered. Mrs. Thompson, are you sure about this? I nodded firmly. Absolutely, Your Honor. I just want this divorce finalized as quickly as possible. As I returned to my seat, I caught a glimpse of Adam's face, a mixture of relief and confusion. He thought he was getting off easy. Little did he know, outside the courthouse, Claire cornered me. What are you playing at, Lisa? She hissed. I smiled serenely. No games, Claire. I'm just ready to move on. Her eyes flicked to David, who stood waiting by his car. With him. How pathetic. Careful, Claire, I warned softly. Your true colors are showing. As she stormed off, David approached. You were amazing in there, he said, squeezing my hand. I leaned into him, feeling a flutter in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. Couldn't have done it without you. Over the next few weeks, Adam's transformation was startling. Without my carefully planned meals and exercise routines, he quickly put on weight. His once crisp suits grew tight, his chin doubling. I, on the other hand, threw myself into reinvention. With David's encouragement, I expanded my yoga studio, even starting a teacher training program. We spent evenings planning and dreaming, his business acumen complementing my passion perfectly. One night, as we celebrated the studio's expansion over dinner, my phone buzzed. Adam's name flashed on the screen. "Aren't you going to answer it?" David asked. I silenced the phone. No need. He's not my problem anymore. But curiosity got the better of me. Later that night, I listened to Adam's voicemail. "Lisa," his voice slurred, clearly drunk. "I messed up, Claire. She's not who I thought. Can we talk?" I deleted the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to gloat, to revel in his misery, but mostly I felt pity and relief that I'd escaped that fate. The next morning, I woke to find Claire exposed, trending on social media. Somehow, her history of home-wrecking and manipulation had leaked online. Her carefully curated image was in tatters. As I scrolled through the posts, my phone lit up with a text from David. "You didn't have anything to do with this, did you?" I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the reply button. This was the moment of truth. Did I take the high road, or embrace the darker path of revenge? The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Claire, mascara streaking down her face. "You," she snarled. "You did this." As she lunged at me, I realized the true battle was just beginning, and this time I was ready to fight fire with fire. I stood my ground as Claire's mascara-streaked face contorted with rage. Her manicured nails dug into my arms as she shook me violently. "You ruined everything," she shrieked. "How dare you?" I pried her hands off me, my voice steady. "I didn't do anything, Claire. Your past caught up with you." She lunged again, but this time I was ready. Years of yoga had honed my reflexes, and I easily sidestepped her attack. Claire stumbled, crashing into the entryway table. "What's going on here?" David's voice boomed from behind me. He must have arrived just in time to witness the chaos. Claire's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. "You too?" she spat. "You planned this together, didn't you?" Before I could respond, Adam's car screeched to a halt in front of the house. He lumbered out, his once trim physique now soft and bulging. "Claire," he called, his voice slurring slightly. "What are you doing here?" The scene before us was surreal. Claire, disheveled and wild-eyed, Adam, unkempt and swaying slightly, David, a pillar of strength beside me, and me, standing at the center of the storm I'd inadvertently created. "Adam," Claire cooed, her demeanor shifting instantly. "These two are trying to destroy us. We need to stick together." I watched as Adam's bleary eyes tried to focus. "Lisa," he mumbled, "I've been trying to call you." "I know," I said softly. "But it's too late, Adam." Claire's head whipped around. "Too late for what? What have you done?" David stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "It's over, Claire. The truth is out there now. All of it." "What truth?" Adam asked, confusion etched on his face. I took a deep breath. "Claire's history, Adam, her pattern of manipulation, of destroying relationships. It's all been exposed online." Claire let out a strangled cry. "You can't prove anything." "We didn't have to," David said. "Your ex-boyfriends, the women whose lives you've ruined, they all came forward. The evidence was overwhelming." Adam stumbled back, his face ashen. "Is this true, Claire? Was I just another conquest?" Claire's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Don't be ridiculous, Adam. We love each other. This is just Lisa's jealousy talking." But I could see the doubt creeping into Adam's eyes. He turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. "Lisa, I'm so sorry." The words I'd longed to hear for months now felt hollow. I shook my head. "It's not me you need to apologize to, Adam. It's yourself." Claire, sensing she was losing control, made one last desperate attempt. She lunged at me again, her nails raking across my cheek. I stumbled back, shocked by the sudden attack. David moved to intervene, but I held up a hand. "No," I said firmly. "This ends now." I straightened, looking Claire directly in the eye. "You've taken enough from me, Claire. My marriage, my trust, my peace of mind. But you know what? You can't take my dignity, or my strength." I turned to Adam. "And you. I loved you for 15 years, but I won't waste another moment on someone who couldn't see my worth." With trembling hands, I reached for my phone. "I'm calling the police. Claire, you can explain your assault to them." Claire's face drained of color. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, my finger hovering over the dial button. The tension in the air was palpable. Adam looked lost, his world crumbling around him. Claire's eyes darted frantically, searching for an escape, and David stood tall beside me, a silent pillar of support. As I pressed call, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was it, the moment everything changed. The life I'd known was gone, shattered by betrayal and lies. But from the ashes, something new was emerging, something stronger. The operator's voice crackled through the phone. 911, what's your emergency? I took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. I'd like to report an assault. 1 year later, I stood at the entrance of my expanded yoga studio, watching as students filed in for the grand reopening. The past 12 months had been a whirlwind of change, growth, and unexpected blessings. As I greeted familiar faces and welcomed newcomers, I caught sight of my reflection in the studio's mirrored wall. The woman staring back at me was transformed, confident, radiant, and free from the shadows of the past. David appeared beside me, his hand finding the small of my back. Ready for your big day? He asked, his eyes twinkling with pride. I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. More than ready. As I prepared to lead the first class, my phone buzzed with a news alert. I nearly dropped it when I saw the headline, Disgraced Socialite Claire Donovan Arrested for Fraud. My hands trembled as I read the article. Claire's web of lies had finally unraveled completely. Her attempts to maintain her lavish lifestyle through increasingly desperate means had led to her downfall. And Adam? The article mentioned him briefly, a former associate who had cooperated with the investigation. I could only imagine how far he'd fallen. As I set my phone aside, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The last vestiges of my old life, of the pain and betrayal, were finally fading away. The class began, and I lost myself in the flow of movement and breath. As I guided my students through each pose, I felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. This was where I belonged. After class, as the studio emptied, David approached with a small velvet box in his hand. My heart skipped a beat. Lisa, he began, his voice thick with emotion. This past year has been the most incredible journey. You've shown me what true strength and resilience look like. I can't imagine my life without you. He dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning sapphire ring. Will you marry me? Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. As David slipped the ring onto my finger, I marveled at how life had come full circle. Later that evening, as David and I celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, my phone rang. It was Adam. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Lisa. His voice was ragged, barely recognizable. I saw the news about Claire. I wanted to apologize for everything. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. Thank you, Adam. I hope you find peace. As I hung up, I felt the last piece of the puzzle fall into place. I turned to David, who was watching me with concern. Everything okay? He asked. I smiled, feeling a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. Everything is perfect. That night, as I lay in bed next to David, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of betrayal, the fire of revenge, the joy of rediscovery, all of it had shaped me into the woman I was today. Claire had thought she was destroying my life, but in reality, she had set me free to find my true strength, to build a life on my own terms, and to love without fear or doubt. As I drifted off to sleep, I sent a silent thank you to the universe, for the challenges that had tested me, for the friends who had supported me, and for the love that had saved me. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, but I was ready for them all. Because now I knew the truth. Happiness wasn't about having a perfect life. It was about finding perfection in the life you have. And as I snuggled closer to David, feeling the cool metal of my engagement ring against my skin, I knew that this moment, this life, was as perfect as it gets. The storm had passed, and I had not only survived, but thrived. Claire's manipulations, Adam's betrayal, they were all just chapters in a book that had led me here, to this moment of peace, of love, of true fulfillment. As sleep claimed me, I smiled. The best was yet to come, and I couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring.